Welcome to the Restore It Ralph channel. This is my 1984 Dodge Diplomat 5.9 Magnum eBay GT45 Turbo, and today I'm going to start the installation of the Holley Terminator X EFI system. With some help from Holley, I've got a pile of parts here that go on this car that should not only help with the power for now, but give me a lot more room to grow, a lot more ease of tuning. So I've got a 4-barrel throttle body, I've got the Terminator X fuel injection system, I've got a Chrysler dual sync distributor to go along with that Terminator. Picked up a adapter bracket for the Chrysler linkage. I'm not sure if I'm going to need that or not. MSD 6A ignition and a map sensor and coolant temp sensor to go along. Hopefully, sure, I'll run into some challenges installing this system just because the 5.9 Magnum or Chrysler in general is not the most popular application for these types of systems, but I can't imagine it being any harder than what I already did making the original 97 electronics work in a 1984 car. So comparatively, this should be relatively plug and play. Some of the mechanical stuff that I'm going to find as far as fuel rails and that sort of things in cables, kickdown cables, throttle cables, that's probably going to be my main roadblocks in this system. I have removed the original throttle body and the 2-barrel to 4-barrel adapter that came in the Hughes kit. This is going to be my main challenge, I think, is going to be getting or fabricating this bracket to work on the Holley throttle body. The reason I'm wanting to do that is I've got a cable, throttle valve cable that works the transmission on the Mopar 727. The adjustability of it is nice. It came stock on all the Magnum pickup trucks with the 47 or 46RH and 46RE. I've also already converted the car to run the Dodge Ram throttle body cable, or throttle cable, I should say. So I'd like to keep all that. If not, it's not a big deal. I've got a throttle cable for the Diplomat, and I think I've got all the old mechanical linkage that I can make work. I just rather not if possible. We'll see what goes on there. When I test fit the throttle body after installing the Hughes intake, I realized there was going to be some interference between the throttle linkage and the fuel rails, the stock fuel rails. So after talking with Ryan at Holley, he's been a great help with this project. He found me a set of fuel rails that kind of dip down in the center to clear the linkage. These are actually off of a small block Chevy injection kit that they make, and after measuring the stuff, it looks like it's going to fit perfectly, or pretty darn close. Enough wiggle room in the injector O-rings to make it close enough, I believe. So it's time to start removing the factory Dodge Ram wire harness that I integrated into this engine for the swap. I'm going to do it carefully because this harness will go into pretty much any old car that I would like to Magnum swap, and while taking this PCM that's already tuned for a turbo off means it can go on to any other car that's Magnum swapped in my fleet, which I think is about 4 of them right now. All right, time to get started. Starting to make some progress, or unprogress is what it seems like, because I'm removing the harness that I built for the original swap. So if I didn't care about keeping this harness, it could be done a lot quicker, but I'm trying to, well, save this harness for the next ridiculous turbo Magnum project, because, you know, this is a proven 12-second deal, so why not stuff it in something else eventually? So as I'm taking this thing apart, I'm trying to mark things. So I've got this going through the factory bulkhead harness. I don't feel like taking that apart right this second. So I'm going to snip that right there, so that way I can wire it into another DLC at a later date. But as I'm pulling this apart, the hardest part is separating the original Diplomat harness, which is like here, from this mess of wires that is the factory Magnum harness. So once I get down to some of the connections. I'll show where those originally hooked up to. So started removing some of this. I decided to leave this relay box in here at the moment just because I do have some powers and stuff, and I know I'm going to need one. I'm just not sure if I'm going to start over with a brand new one. I've got one coming on the way, so either way I'll have this one with this harness or vice versa. ASD output is what runs basically powered all the sensors, and ASD control is from the PCM telling it to turn those on. So it's on a relay. I won't need that particular relay on the new system. I'm just kind of realizing how much cleaner the wiring is going to be with the new setup, I'm hoping. So I did a pre-test fit the other day, and I know that the spacing on these small block Chevy injector rails are going to be correct, but I'm not sure if I want to make it so the, I don't know, the whoopie-doo or whatever you want to call it goes to the outside, or it's meant to tuck in and bolt to a small block Chevy manifold using that little tab there. But I've got all kinds of ports in the way there. So I'm going to play around with it and see what happens. After removing those hoses, this rail fits nicely. It kind of tucks in there. Might be able to make a bracket. It goes from the intake or even one of those ports. I make a pipe bushing 2-threaded adapter to where it can bolt in place. I think that will simplify the installation quite a bit. I'll go over to the other side. I know I got a intake air temp sensor that is in the way, but now that I think about it, I might not need that with the new setup. Yeah, not sure what I was thinking on that. I forgot that this is the factory Mopar air intake temp sensor, so that could probably get out of the way, and we'll figure it out from there. So I still have some interference on the linkage on the throttle plate there with this setup. I don't think I did the other day if I flip this injector rail around, but when I mocked it up the other day, it wasn't the injector rail that was hitting so much as all of my charge pipe and air hat, and what was happening is bottoming out right in there. So I'm going to double check that and test fit it again and see. What I did was I had a spacer in the shop here. I just put a 1-inch spacer in it, and that cleared on that. I'm going to try that again here. With the 1-inch spacer, that gives me the clearance I need. Plenty of room there. I have not thought about my trans cable and throttle cable yet. I'll look and see if that adapter piece goes on there. I'm having second thoughts about keeping the original Magnum stuff. I just kind of remembered that I have a low car kickdown cable at home. It was left over from a 4-speed swap on my dad's car. So I might go back to the original throttle cable and then maybe an aftermarket kickdown cable on this thing, but I'm going to see how this goes. Loosely bolted the Mopar throttle bracket extension on. Got my charge hat on in place. Got some just enough clearance in here. Everything is clearing so far. Keep adding pieces and go from there. I'm too lazy to grab a tape measure right here, but if I look at my two setups, the new one with the 1-inch spacer, the old slim throttle body with about 2.5-inch spacer, we're maybe, I don't know, 1/4 to 1/2 inch difference by the time I stack gaskets on this one as well. So hopefully I have another 1/2 inch of hood clearance. If I don't, This happened to have a spare hood, although I really like the flat sleeper look. So what started out as a day of what seemed like unprogress, trying to separate the original Diplomat harness from the harness that I added, I was very pleased to see the mechanical parts start to fit up and bolt in place. So I can build some rail brackets with some of the stuff that came with them, and also with a combination of maybe some pipe plugs that I drill and tap or something like that. I'm going to be adding some maybe angled pipe nipples to where I can tap off of there for vacuum and boost reference and all that good stuff. But as far as clearance goes, with the rails and the throttle body, that original problem is gone. So I'm pretty pleased for a day's work. We'll see what happens on the next day. What I'm tackling now is what I anticipate to be one of the more challenging things to get right, is the throttle cable bracket and the throttle valve for the transmission cable bracket. And so on the original Magnum, it pulls, this is the passenger side of the throttle body, the throttle cable pulls from the front, and then it pulls the throttle valve cable towards the front. On the Holley, it's more like an original, like a carburetor. So I've got the Mopar adapter that I bolted onto it, grabbed a stud off of the old, I think it's the original Diplomat carburetor, and that's gonna go for my throttle cable. I'm gonna go back to an original style throttle cable. I had put a Magnum truck throttle cable on the car when I swapped it over. But that makes a challenge for where I'm pulling backwards on this, and I'm gonna have to be pulling forward towards the front of the car for the throttle valve cable. So I've got a little adapter. This happens to be the same as like a GM, I believe, little pin there. So that fits the same as what my throttle valve cable fits. And so when I pull forward on it, I'm just going to double check and make sure that that makes enough distance to pull my throttle valve cable far enough when I go to wide open throttle. So I've got my first draft of a modified factory, I don't know, vintage Carsoy throttle bracket. I'm going to start drilling some holes and see if it'll line up, then hopefully weld the chopped up mount for the TV cable onto the bottom of it. A little bit of paint and it should be ready to go. After test fitting this thing, I think I'm going to cut the bracket like right here and just take this and move it back maybe 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch. That way I got a little bit more adjustment in my cable there. Don't want it to bottom out before it hits wide open throttle. Welded a tab on here that came with those fuel rails. That should be just about right for holding the rear of the rail down. So it's kind of nice to integrate it with this bracket. We'll see how it goes. For some of the rail brackets here, my thought is to use the supplied rail brackets. I've got this one kind of bent a little bit, and then I've got a thick washer on this bolt hole right here. So I'm going to try and take this bracket, bolt it up in there, and then probably clearance it and cut it off, and then weld it to the washer. So that way I've got a pretty simple bracket and I don't have to drill a bunch of holes. snug that up. I think that's going to work. I think for the passenger side, I'm going to go off of the throttle body mounting flange. For the rail, I've got this long bracket set up here, threaded in, and if I take another chunk of metal and go from there to there, can't get my hand to work, but maybe you get the idea. Go from there to there, and hopefully be able to use, probably end up putting studs in the throttle body anyway, so then wing it on there on the top with another nut. I ended up trying the lazy man method, and I think it might actually work. I just took that bracket, put it in the vise, and just kind of bent on it, and I think it might actually work. So I'll straighten it up here and see if it'll work, but it looks like as far as distance from there to there, it's going to be okay. I think by the time I weld a washer underneath that, drill it out, and then straighten it up, I think it's going to work just fine. I'm pretty sure that's going to work, so I'll clean that up and paint it while I'm making this last one, which is probably going to be the longest and hardest one, but shouldn't be too bad. After another long, fiddly day of fabricating, I think I've finally got the brackets that hold the rails down fabricated and bolted in, along with the throttle cable and TV cable bracket. So one of my injector rail mounts is integrated in with that. I think everything is going to work. Ended up converting back to the 84 throttle cable setup, but using the 94 throttle valve cable for the transmission. I believe everything seems to be working properly. Huge shout out to Ryan at Holley. None of this would be possible without his hard work and time in finding the correct pieces for me to put this oddball combination together. Custom fabrication, even at a small scale like this, takes time, but I'm really happy with how it turned out. I think that most of the hard fabrication for this project is completed. That's it for part one of the Holley Terminator X install. Next will be ignition installation and wiring, so stay tuned for that. To keep up with progress on Dirty Harry and other projects on the channel, please like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.